Hi and welcome to this DCP Web Blender 3D smoke simulation beginners tutorial. In today's tutorial we'll be creating a smoke simulation which looks similar to this. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up Blender and we'll click on General here and then we'll go to File, Save As, and we'll save our work. So I've got a folder on my desktop. I'm just going to save the file in here. I'm going to call it smoke-01 and click the save, and then I'm going to click on this cube and press the delete key to delete that cube. I'm going to press Shift and A, and then insert a circle. So we have this circle here and we want to fill in the circle, give it a face, and that face is going to be emitting the smoke. Let's go over to edit mode here, and then we want to go to face and then select fill, or you can just press F as well. We'll fill it. So now it's filled in, the face is filled in basically. Now we can go back to the object mode and we have this circle here with a face, and we want to emit smoke from this circle. So I'm going to middle mouse click and just rotate around this sort of angle here, and I'll go to in fact, let's do one thing. Let's press number 3. Number 3 will take us into the right orthographic, and we just want to give this this circle a bit of depth, right, a bit of thickness. So we use the modifier. So click on modifier, and we're going to use a let's see, we want to solidify here, solidify, and we'll give it a thickness of something like let's just do 0.1 and then click apply. So really all we've done is make it a bit thicker, right? It's just easier to see and easier to work with basically. So let's get some smoke coming out of this circle. So we just do the quick option here. Let's go file save first. We'll go to object, quick effects. So you've got quick effects, you've got like fur, explode. I've done some of these other ones in other tutorials like fluid and explode. I'll have a look at fur at some point, but for now we're going to do quick smoke here. So we've done quick smoke, and if we click play we see some smoke coming out. So that's what we asked for and that's what it's given us. So that's good, and we want to now make this look a lot better, right? And we need to just change around a few things. So this orange box here is called the domain, and this is where the smoke will be emitted within this domain. So if I click play, you'll see the smoke will stop at the top here, right? It won't get any higher than this position here. If the box is taller, the smoke will go higher basically, right? So what we'll do is we'll press number 7. Number 7 takes us into the top view, and we want to enlarge the size of this orange box or this yellow box. We'll make it bigger. So what we'll do is press it's actually called the smoke domain. So over here you can see smoke domain. So make sure that's selected, and then press S to scale, and then hold down the shift key and press Z, shift and Z, and that will lock it on the X and Y axis. And then hold down the control key, and while you're moving your mouse it will move in increments, and we want to move it so that it's around, let's say, this big here. You can see like roughly how wide that is. It's going to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of these big boxes, right? These big square boxes, 6 wide. So if we middle mouse click we can pan across and we can see we've got much more width now, but we need height as well. We also want to adjust where this smoke domain is positioned. So let's press number 3. Number 3 will take us into the right orthographic. We're going to click on this this circle here first, and you click on the move tool, then hold down the control key and click on the blue arrow, and we're just going to drag it up one square basically. Yeah. So holding down the control key when you move objects will move them in increments rather than just moving it randomly anywhere. If you hold down the control key it will move it in increments as you're moving with your mouse. And we want to move this object as well, the smoke domain. We're going to move it to this green line. So we'll hold down the control key again and drag up the smoke domain so it sits right on that green line there. So now we've got the this cylinder or this circle and the smoke domain positioned correctly. Now, in fact, we've done a slight mistake here. We really want to increase the height of this smoke domain as well. So what we'll do, it's not a big problem. What we'll do is press we want to scale it on the Z axis, right? The blue line. So we're going to press S to scale, then Z, then hold down the control key as well, and we're going to scale it out to, let's say, around this height here. So it almost looks like a box now, right? A square box from this angle. Then we'll use the move tool and then hold down the control key and drag it back up again. So it sits on that green line. And now we can middle mouse click. And if we click play, we'll see our smoke will rise a lot higher now because it's got more space to generate that smoke. Now, what we want to do, in fact, probably what we'll do, let's have a look. Let's go file save. We've done a bit of work now, so let's save it. I think this will be okay. We might adjust the width of this smoke domain afterwards, but I think it's going to be okay. We can always look at that after. Now, what we want to do is, let's see, what's the best thing to do first? Let's add our text in. So let's press number 7. Number 7 takes us into the top view. We can zoom in using the mouse wheel, and we'll press Shift A, and we're going to insert our text. So here we've got some text, and I'm just going to press the Tab key. You can go to edit mode here, like this, using this option here, or you can press the Tab key. So just click on the text, then press the Tab key, then delete this text. And I'm going to type in, let's type in something like smoke effects, something like this. And we'll hit the Tab key again. And now we want to change the font and the size and a few other bits, right? So you might not see this on my screen too well, but if I click on it, it'll be a bit more visible. But here's the smoke domain, and we're going to make sure our text is not wider than the smoke domain itself, right? So we want to increase the text size. So let's click on it. I can just about see the smoke domain, the border of it, and I'm going to click on the text tool here. So the text is selected, this option here will appear. I'm going to go to font, and then I'm going to increase the size. Let's see, where's the size gone? Size is here. Let's try and set it to around 4. 4 is way too big. Let's set it to like 3. Maybe that's still a bit too big. Let's set it to around 2.5. Nah, that's still too big. Around 2, maybe a little bit smaller. Let's set it to around 1.8. I'm trying to get this smoke text no more wider than this box, right? So 1.8 should be okay, but we can adjust that slightly if we need to. And now we want to change the font. I've already found a font that I like, so we'll download this font, and I'll give you a link to that same font in the YouTube description. So just check the YouTube description for this particular link, and we'll download this font here. And we'll just go ahead and click the download button, and we'll drag and drop that font into here. We'll right click and we'll extract the font and close the browser. We can delete this zip file now, and we'll rename this to font. Inside here we've got loads of stuff, but really we don't need any of this. All we need is just this file, the TTF file. So let's go back to Blender. And inside Blender, we're in the text options here, the object data for the text. And we want to go to regular and click the open folder. And then we'll select the font and select this font here. And then click open. Now you can see the text has changed. And let's go to object. Let's go to set origin, geometry to origin. And you can see, I don't know if you can see that. I will click on it. You can see the text is outside of this orange box, and we don't want that. So let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's set it to like about 1.4. That's a bit too small. 2.4. That's a bit too big. So let's set it. Let's just try and move it with the mouse here. Let's get it to around 1.6. I think it's going to be good. Around 1.6. Let's try that object. Whenever you change the font size, you need to go back to object, set origin, geometry origin, because that will center it back out again. And I think that's actually a pretty good size. You can see that it's inside the smoke domain, but we want to make it slightly smaller than that. So let's make it maybe about 1. Let's do it about 1.5. I think will be better. Object, set origin, geometry to origin. That basically, that option there is putting the center point within this object. So if you ever want to rotate the object or do something with it, it'll be nice and easy to rotate from a middle pivot point, right? Let's middle mouse click and rotate around. We've got our smoke text here, and we're going to give it some depth, and we're going to make it quite thick. Normally I wouldn't make it this thick, but let's go to geometry here. Geometry, and the offset, we're going to set it to not the offset, leave the offset at 0, The extrusion, we're going to set it to, let's see, probably about, I think 0.4 would be good. So it's quite a thick text. You can see the height of it is quite thick. And then we're going to give it a little bit of a bevel. So on the bevel option, we're going to set it to like 0.02. It's got a little bit of a rounded edge around it. That will help to pick up the light when we do the light effects. So let's go to File, Save As, and save it as version 2. And click Save. I've just set it to 02 here. We've got 01, now we've got 02 file. Let's click Save. And we want to rotate this text. So let's select it. A couple of ways to rotate it. Let's do it the shortcut way. So we select the text. We're going to press the letter R on our keyboard to rotate. Press the letter X to isolate it on this red line, the X axis. And then type in 90, and then hit enter. That's one way to do it. The other way, you can just click here and just type 90 value in here. But try and learn the shortcuts, that's going to help you later. And we'll press number 1. Number 1 will take us into the front view. So now we're looking at it from the front. And let's just click on our smoke domain. We can see where our smoke domain is, and we want to move that text to roughly the middle point. It doesn't have to be exactly, but roughly around the middle. Just click on the text, hold down the control key, and we'll drag it up to around here. And we'll see what does that look like. Let's click on the smoke domain again. And we can see that's roughly in the middle, quite close to the middle point, right? Maybe even a little bit lower. But let's leave it there for now. We can adjust it afterwards. So we go ahead and click play. We've got this smoke floating up, and we've got the text there. So we want to add a bit more color and a bit more dimension to this, right? It's looking a bit plain. At the moment, we're looking at the content in solid view. So really, we want to start working with the render view. So let's go ahead and click render view. And when we click on render view, let's go to File, Save. If we were to click play, we won't see any smoke. Let's pause that, go to the first frame, click play. You'll see there's no smoke because we need to do a few settings. So let's go into the render settings here, and we'll turn on the volumetric, and we'll turn on volumetric shadows. We're going to make some adjustments in here afterwards, but for now we'll leave it as it is. And when we come to getting closer towards the end, we'll make some adjustments in here. But if we click play now, you can start to see the smoke here, right? Here it is. So let's go back, and let's just go to File, Save, and we want to now duplicate this smoke. So we want 3 of them basically, right? So let's press number 7. Number 7 takes us into the top view. We're going to zoom in, and we're going to click on the circle. So we've got the circle selected. We're going to press Shift and D, Shift D to duplicate. So press Shift and D, and then hit the Enter key, and then press Shift and D one more time and hit the Enter key. Now you've got 3 copies of this circle. You've got the original one, and you've got circle 1 and 2 here. Let's click on circle 1, hold down the control key, and we're going to drag it across using the control key, and we're going to drag it to, I think, around here, like in the middle of this bit of text here. I think right about here should be good, right? We want to evenly space them out, so we'll click on the circle here, the second one, and we'll hold down the control key and drag it to roughly the same position as the other one, so about here. So they're all evenly spaced out. Let's press in fact let's middle mouse click and rotate around again. If we click play now we've got 3 smokes simulations going, right? Okay, so let's go to the world settings, and let's click on color here and set it to black for now. And now we can see the smoke a bit better in here. And now we want to sort out the lighting a little bit, because white light, it's not looking that impressive. You can leave it white if you want, but let's make it look a bit better. So what we will do is click on this light source and delete it. We're going to press Shift A and insert another light source, which will be a point light. It's going to insert it right at the bottom down here, and we want to drag it up so that it sits behind the text. So hold down the control key and just drag up so that it's sitting behind the text. Around here should be good, right here. Then we want to duplicate that light source and drag it over the other 2 circles. So let's press, in fact we can go into solid view. Solid view will be a bit easier to see things. So click solid view here, then press number 7. We can see the light source right here. This is what's been selected at the moment, and we're going to press Shift and D to duplicate it once, and then Shift D to duplicate it twice. So really we've got 3 point lights and we've got 3 circles. So let's click on point light 1, and we'll hold down the control key and drag that so that it sits above this circle here, and we'll click on the other point light and drag that one across so it sits above the circle here as well. So now we've got 3 light sources and they're all sitting behind the text. Let's see if they're sitting behind. They're actually sitting inside the text. We want them to be just behind the text, so they're sitting inside the text almost, right? We don't want that. We want them to be behind. So let's click on the first one, hold down the Shift key, click on number 1 and number 2. So that will select all 3 of them, these 3 points, and we'll just use the hold down the control key and use this green arrow to drag them back one so they sit behind the text like this. Let's go to File, Save. Let's click on the first point light and we'll go back to render view, and then we can go to the light source here and we'll click on color and we can pick a color. So I'm going to pick something like I'm going to go for like a light blue. These colors entirely your choice now, right? This point 1 is going to be the left side, and that can be a different color. Let's make that like an orange, maybe a red. I don't know. Let's have a look. Green looks pretty good with the blue. And then we'll click on the last one over here, this one here, which is point light number 2, and we'll click there, and we're going to make that like a purple. So I've got these sort of colors. Maybe this green one I'm going to make yellow. I think yellow will be better. Yeah, that looks good. Let's go to File, Save, and then we can experiment with that. We can increase their power. We can do a few things afterwards. But if we go back now and click play, we can see our smoke is now being illuminated by these light sources, and so is the text as well, right? We can see that in here now. So what we want to do now is go to File, Save As, and let's save it as version 3, and we're going to go to the, let's pause this for a minute. Pause it on any frame where you can see a bit of light and stuff. Let's say like frame 105 is fine for me. Let's go to shading, and inside shading we'll go to world settings here, and we've got the world output and we've got the background here. We're going to press Shift A and go into the shader and select volume scatter and connect the volume scatter to the volume here, and then we'll set the density to 0.015, and let's go into the render view and let's see. So basically this is going to affect how the volumetric lighting appears in your scene, right? So I'm setting it to 0.015, and in this option you can play around with to change how that lighting is affected. So you've got to really experiment with this. I'll leave you to experiment these settings here. Find out something that you like. You can even change the color here. You can play around with the settings and get more brighter or darker. You can play around with the colors. You can really experiment with this, but I'll leave you to play around with whatever sort of light effects you think looks good. Let's go back to the layout and check it. I think it's fine. You got this light scattering. It's looking pretty cool. Let's click the play button, and we've got this smoke rising. So let's sort out the smoke. It's not that impressive at the moment. We can make this much better. So let's click on the first circle, and we'll go to the physics settings. And in fact, let's think about this. Okay, yeah, we'll go to physics, and this first option here really determines how much smoke is going to be emitted from that object. So this is the center one, right? So sometimes it's easier to look at this in the solid view, although it's grayed out like this. If I were to set this number to, let's say, something like 3, and go back and click play, you'll see the middle one's got much more smoke coming out compared to the 2 side ones. This one's set to 3, and the other ones are set to 1.5. So you can play around with the settings and get more smoke out of the middle one and a little bit less, make it a little bit more dynamic. I think something like this might look quite cool. So we'll have more smoke being emitted out of the middle one, but less out of the sides here. You can see that. You can kind of see that here. And what I want to do also is, let's see. Let's have a look here. We want to go to the smoke domain. So click on the smoke domain. And in the dissolve, we want to set this to this dissolve. Basically, how is this smoke going to dissolve, at what point? So it's set to 5. This is quite a low number, so let's set it to around 20 and let's see how high it gets. So it's getting pretty high, and we want this smoke to really get past the text, right? Somewhere around here. So I think we can bring that down a little bit and let's try it around 15. I think it needs to be a bit more. Or we could increase the amount of smoke being emitted, right? But let's set it to around 20. That should be fine. I think 20 is going to be good. Okay, so what we will do now, let's go back into our render view. You can see what's going on here, and we want to add a bit of turbulence to this smoke. So let's press Shift A and go to Force Field, and we'll add turbulence, and that will be this field here. So let's rename it Field TUR for turbulence, and let's set its strength to around 30. And that will make the smoke move a little bit more dynamic. It won't be all so rigid. Like each smoke will be a bit different now. Each one of these columns is going to be a bit different. You can see that the way it's moving. Probably see that more in the this solid view compared to if I set it to like 0. You'll see they look pretty similar when I set it to 0. They're looking quite the same in terms of their flow going upwards. Set it to something like 40, then you see the smoke has a bit of movement to it and it's a bit more random because we're putting some turbulence inside, right? So 40 looks good. Yeah, I think that's going to work well for us. Let's go back to our render view. We can see the smoke in here now, and let's see. I think the first thing we should do is go File, Save As, and save it as version 4. So let's save it as version 4, and maybe these lights need to be a little bit brighter. So let's click on the first one, the middle one, and we'll go to the light source and we'll set it to something like 20. So we'll just pump up the lights a little bit, I think, brighten them up. I think maybe that's a bit too much. Let's set it to around 15. Maybe 10 was fine actually. Yeah, I think 10 is fine actually. Okay. So now we just need to really do our camera animation, and then we need to set the smoke simulation to a much higher resolution before we bake it, right? So right now it's set to a really low resolution. So the reason why it's like that, a couple of reasons. While I'm working inside Blender, I can move around quite freely. You can see it's very smooth. I'm hitting around 29 or 30 frames. In fact, one thing we should do is click on output and set it to 30 frames a second. Let's set it to 30 frames here underneath the output. Let's go to the render settings and turn on the bloom as well, and we'll get some sort of light effects here off of the bloom, and then we can adjust. You can kind of see that here, the bloom. When I turn it on, it will have that to shine down the side, and we can adjust the radius here, give it more or less. This is again your own preference. I'll leave you to play around with the bloom settings. Normally it's just the radius that I work with, or the intensity. You can reduce or increase the intensity. Don't overdo it because it will just make things look a bit blurry, but this should be pretty good. Let's go to File, Save. We're going to click on the smoke text itself, and we'll go to File, Save As, and we'll go to version 5 and click Save. And then this smoke text, we're going to go to Object, convert it to a mesh object. Now it's going to behave as a mesh, and there's a reason why we've done that. If we go ahead and click on this text here, we can now go to the physics settings and go to smoke, and then we can set it as a collision. Now the smoke will hit this object. Some of it will get through the gaps, but some of it will actually hit the object and sort of flow off to the side. So this will look a little bit better when we render it out, rather than the smoke just flowing through the text as if it's not even there. Now the smoke will actually interact with this text by hitting it and flowing through the gaps, flowing around sort of the edge a little bit as well. Okay, let's see. Let's go to File, Save. Now we want to Really we should do the camera animation. I think will be a wise move. So let's do that first, and then we'll sort out the settings for the smoke to bake it as a high resolution. It's worth doing the camera work now because it's at such a low res, we can work with it quite easily. So I think what we'll do is we'll set this to, we're going to set this to 180 frames. So this should be 30 frames a second. That would be 5-second animation, right? So maybe we'll set it to 210 to give it 6 seconds. That's 7 seconds, 7. So let's set that back to 180. Yep, that would be 6 seconds. So let's see. Let's hit this. In fact, let's position our camera first. So let's press number 1. Number 1 will take us into the front orthographic. Then we can try and get your smoke text in the center of the screen like this. It just helps a little bit. Press Control Alt and 0. Control Alt 0 will bring the camera into the center here, or what we can currently see. So now this box here, this box represents the camera because we've moved it into this position. And we will go to the camera settings here, or the object data for the camera, and we want to bring that camera back a little bit, right? So let's move it back a little bit. Let's see what we're moving. We're moving the text at the moment. So press Control Z. If you've done that, press Control and Z, and we want to click on camera up here, camera, and we want to move in fact, set the X location to 0. So set that to 0, and then use the Y to move the camera back to around here, and we're going to bring maybe the text. I like to try and get everything centered out, so it's nicely centered, right? The X is going to move it left and right. You can see we can move the camera left and right, but we don't really want to do that, so we always set that to 0, and then we'll set the Y to -17, and we'll set the Z to 5, and that should be nice round numbers to work with. I like round numbers in here, but you can, it doesn't really matter too much. But I think that's a good point to work with. And what we want to do is think about how long is our first part of the animation going to be, and I think it's going to be like what is that, 1.5 seconds, 45. So we'll hit the record button and we'll go to the camera settings here. So make sure the blue button is ticked or enabled. That's the recording button. And we'll make sure the camera is selected and we're in the object data, and we press the letter I here, and then move our mouse cursor over here and press the letter I. That inserts a keyframe for these values, the X, the Y, the Z, for the location and the rotation. You can see the keyframes here. Now we can go back to the first frame. So we click this little arrow that takes us back to the first frame, and we can press the letter I here again and the letter I here again. So this orange line represents that we've got 2 keyframes, and the orange line in between represents that there's no difference between the first and the last keyframe. But we're going to change that. So what we want to do is move the camera forward. So we're going to move the camera forward so that it's past the light source, right? So where it's like black here, you can see it's black. So I think that will be around, let's see, let's get it to, let's cancel that. Let's get it to, I think 4 meters, right? Or 4 meters here. This position here is good for me, and I'm going to rotate it on the let's see, not this one, on the y-axis. I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees and hit enter, and then I'm going to untick the record button and click play, and it's going to sort of flow in like this, right? That's going to be our first part of the animation. It's going to flow in like this. And I think what we'll do is go back to this keyframe here, 45 keyframe, hit the record button, and I think we'll move the camera back a bit more. We want it to be a bit further back, let's say -20, because then we want to move the camera forward while the smoke is flowing, and we need a bit more space to move the camera forward afterwards. And it's going to be a small movement, it's not going to be major, nothing too big. So what we'll do is move to the end keyframe 180, and we'll press the letter I here again and the letter I here, and we're just going to move the camera forward, and maybe we'll move it, let's see, the rotation, we'll set it to something like 87 degrees, that's going to have a slight rotation on it. And then the Z-axis, we can move it up slightly. So we're looking slightly down at the text now. So at a slight angle, we can see like the top of the text slightly. So let's set that to 6. And let's set that to 87. And we'll set this to -17. So if we hit the record button to turn it off, go back to the first frame, click play, we can see what it looks like now. And we can see that it's slowly moving towards the text. Now, what we want to do is, let me just scrub through this and explain. So as this is moving, we can see the smoke is already being emitted, and the smoke will continue to be emitted. And you can notice that the camera is not really where this smoke is being emitted from. I want the smoke to kind of flow into the camera view. And by the time it gets to the end frame, I want the smoke to have faded out, just leaving the text on its own. So to do that, what we'll do is go to the first frame, hit the record button, and we'll go to the first circle. In fact, let's see. Let's go to the smoke domain, go to the physics settings here, and we've got this dissolve option. So on this first frame, we'll press the letter I for 20 value, right? So here it's set to 20, and we're going to move to, let's say, around frame 70, and we'll press the letter I here again, and it will be 20. So these values won't change. Then we'll go all the way to 180, press the letter I here, and then set the value to 1. So now now our smoke will fade out as it's moving across this part of the timeline. So let's click play and see that happen. Might be a bit difficult to see. Let's go into let's see, have we made a mistake here? Oh, here we go. You can see the smoke starts to fade out, right? So maybe we need a bit more smoke coming out. It looks like it's barely getting to the top here, right? And we want to see a bit more of that smoke. So got a couple of options. We could either, let's go to the first circle. It's set to 3 at the moment. Let's try and set it to 5. Now you can see a lot more smoke getting to the top. I think that's a bit too much. Let's say it's a 4. I think that should be good. And then on the first circle, it's set to 1.5. We're going to set it to 2.5. There's going to be a bit more smoke out of this left one. You can see there's a bit more smoke now. And we'll go to the second circle and set that to 2.5 as well. So now all 3 of them will be emitting a bit more smoke now. So there'll be a bit more time for it to rise and get to the top there, right? Okay, let's go back to our render view and see that. I think that's going to be good. So let's go to File, Save. You can play around with the camera, you can animate in any way that you want. I'm just trying to show you it's really about a smoke simulation more than anything, but the volumetric lighting just adds some nice color to that smoke rather than it being quite plain. But now we want to set up the smoke to be of a much higher resolution. Let's see. So what we'll do, we can really move to like around frame 90. And we'll go to the smoke domain, and in the resolution divisions here, we're going to set it to 128. 128 here, and then we're going to turn on high resolution. High resolution here, and set the divisions to 2. I wouldn't advise setting it to more than 2. It's going to take quite a bit of time for Blender to bake out all of these frames with this high resolution smoke, so you have to be a bit patient with that, but we should get some good results, get some good effects. The smoke will look quite realistic, and we want to make sure that in our render view we'll go to the volumetrics here, and we'll set the samples here to 90, and we'll set the shadow samples to 90 as well, and we'll set the tile size to 2. Here, let's go to File, Save As, and Save It as version 6, click save, and now we can go ahead and bake these frames. So baking is basically telling Blender what this smoke simulation is going to look like, and it's kind of memorizing that smoke simulation. It's quite dynamic, right? Smoke, it moves in different directions, and when Blender wants to understand how that smoke works or how it's going to be visualized, it's important that that information is baked into some file, and then when we come to play it again later, if we come to load up Blender and make some edits, it will memorize that smoke motion because it needs to look quite realistic. So to bake them, we're going to go to smoke domain, and we will click on the physics again, and underneath the cache we'll click, before you do anything, make sure you set this to 180. So the first frame is 1 right down here, and the last frame is set to 180, so you must set it to 180 here, otherwise you're going to waste a lot of time baking things that don't exist. And we'll click Bake All Dynamics. Normally I'll go to File, Save, and then click Bake All Dynamics. So this is going to take a fair amount of time. It's going to be quite CPU intensive as well, and memory intensive. It's not going to be the quickest job, but you can see it's moving along. It's on frame 2, then it will go to frame 3 and 4, and this could take, you know, a good 20 minutes, possibly, maybe less. So normally while it's doing this, I'll go away and do something else and come back and check it when it's ready. So I'll pause the video here, and we'll come back and have a look once it's done all of the 180 frames. You can see roughly it's going to take around maybe 30 seconds for each frame to be baked, right? But depending on your computer, it may do it very fast, or it may even take longer. So we'll minimize that. I'll do something else for now, and we'll come back and have a look when it's ready. Okay, so Blender's finished baking out all of the frames, and we can just randomly click on the frames. You can't really play this in Blender in real time. It's just too complex for it to play out. It's taking quite a bit of time just to render out, you know, one particular frame. You can see it's quite sluggish now, but you can still click on frames and see what the smoke effect will look like. And we just click on a few frames just to see what it looks like, and it seems to look fine, looks good. So we can just go ahead and render out the final video animation. Let's go to File, Save. Let's go to the output settings here, output, and then make sure it's set to 30 frames. Your end frame should be at 180, which is fine. We're going to render it out at 1080p, which is fine as well. And then let's make sure we select AVI JPEG here. There are other file formats you can work in here as well, but I'm going to use AVI JPEG, and set RGB and 90% compression. Quality should be fine. I'll click the open folder. I'm in the same folder where I've saved all my Blender files. I'll click accept here, and then we'll just press Ctrl F12 or go to render up here, and where is it, render animation, or Ctrl F12. So we'll click that, and Blender will start to render out each frame, and then create a video sequence of those images at the end, which is what the AVI JPEG file will be at the end. So this is again going to take some time, so I'll pause the video here and we'll see what the end result looks like once Blender's gone through all of the 180 frames. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all of the frames, so we should have a video file now. So let's go to File, Save, and we'll close this, and we'll open up this folder, and inside this folder we've got this new movie file. If I open that up, we can just set this to repeat. We can view it a few times, and let's have a look at this and see how it came out. So down here we can see the smoke collision hitting the text at the bottom. You can kind of see almost like a little line being drawn across the bottom here. That's the smoke hitting the text, and it still manages to get through. I think it looks pretty cool. Let me know what you think in the YouTube description, or if you're watching this on Facebook, tell me what you think. Put a little comment in the description. I'd like to see what you think as well, and also try and send me a link to examples of what you've done. I'm curious to see what it looks like. So yeah, please send me examples of how you managed to use this tutorial to make your own animation sequence with smoke and text. Okay, so overall I'm pretty happy with it. What changes might I make if I were to redo this tutorial or this animation? Maybe I would have made the lighting move a little bit. because right now the lighting is very static. So it might have been nice to have, or at least have one light source that moves. Maybe have one that goes from left to right as this text is moving forward. That might have looked pretty cool. But overall, I think it looks very good. I'm quite happy with this. So let's go ahead and close this down. I hope you find this tutorial useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.